Hello Americans channel. This video is made by free videos from Storyblocks, and these images and video we use just for explanation, and it's free use also.
Retired teacher grows tired people using his pool without consent, so he decides to teach them a lesson. The bottles appeared first, one wedged into the hedges, another glinting faintly from the bottom of the pool. Arthur Caldwell fished them out silently, setting them aside with a frown, his hands smelling of chlorine and stale beer. Each discovery pressed heavier on his chest, a reminder that someone had been here when he wasn't. No faces, no voices, just the aftertaste of intrusion. The pool, once his refuge, now seemed unsettled, bearing small but undeniable signs of strangers. Arthur searched for explanations that made sense. Passing kids, drifters cutting through the yard, careless visitors he'd never noticed. But none of them stayed solid in his mind. Now he stood at the water's edge, the chemical tang clinging to the air, watching the cloudy surface ripple faintly in the wind. He had been a teacher, a husband, a man who lived by rules and order. But here, in the sanctuary his wife had loved, he felt powerless, reduced to a tired old man, uncertain of who had claimed his quiet space as their own. Arthur Caldwell had grown used to silence. His house, once alive with the gentle shuffle of his wife's slippers and the faint hum of her favorite radio station, now echoed with the small sounds he made to fill the emptiness. The sounds of cutlery against porcelain, the hiss of the kettle, the steady click of shoes across the patio. His days were deliberate. A retired chemistry teacher, he found purpose in maintenance. The roses she had planted, the oak banisters she had admired, and above all, the pool she had cherished. Every morning he tested the water, reading the pH strips with precision, skimming the surface until it gleamed like glass. It wasn't just upkeep, it was memory. Each clear reflection reminded him of her smile, of the evenings she floated beneath the stars, of mornings when she had coaxed him in for laps before breakfast. But when Arthur wasn't tending to the home, he found his peace by the river. Fishing had always been his quiet refuge. With rod and thermos in hand, he could lose hours listening to the water, patient in a way only age and solitude allowed. The catch hardly mattered. The stillness did. It was on one of those fishing trips that Arthur first noticed the newcomers. When he drove back into the neighborhood, his yard was still damp with afternoon sun, and next door a moving truck blocked the drive. Boxes stacked on the lawn, music spilled from a speaker, and voices carried across the hedge. Arthur paused on his porch, watching. The new family was loud, their movements brisk and careless, their laughter sharp against the hum of summer air. As he lingered, he saw the neighbor woman glance toward his pool. Her gaze lingered on the water, almost appraising, before she turned back to the boxes. It unsettled him in a way he couldn't name. Still, courtesy mattered. He crossed the lawn and raised a hand in greeting. "Hello, I'm Arthur Caldwell. Welcome." The husband barely looked up. "Yeah," he muttered, eyes fixed on his phone. The woman didn't acknowledge him at all. Arthur waited a moment longer, then nodded stiffly and walked back to his house. The sting was small but real. Neighbors once traded bread recipes, the warmth of introductions. These ones hadn't even bothered with words. He told himself it didn't matter. Some people weren't neighborly. He had his roses, his pool, his fishing. It was enough. The next morning, Arthur set off early for the river. The hours passed easily, lines swaying, tea cooling in a thermos. For a while he forgot the silence of the house, forgot the neighbors, lost in the steady rhythm of water and waiting. When he returned that afternoon, he slipped back into his routine. He made tea, read the paper, walked outside to test the pool. At first glance, nothing seemed amiss. The water rippled gently, the sunlight casting its usual shimmer. He skimmed the surface, checked the chlorine, and went back inside. But over the following days, something shifted. Returning from his fishing trips, he began to notice details he couldn't dismiss. A chair pulled slightly out of place. A wet footprint drying on the patio stone. A faint, greasy sheen on the water, as if sunscreen had been washed off into it. Then came the bottles, one at the hedge, another sunk at the bottom of the pool, glinting up at him like a silent dare. Arthur fished it out with the net, heart sinking as he set it on the patio. He had never seen anyone. Not once. But the signs grew harder to ignore. And slowly, a thought crept into his mind, one that tightened his chest. When he was gone, someone was here. Arthur began shortening his fishing trips. At first, it was only an hour less than half a morning, until finally he stopped going altogether. He told himself it was age, that the walk to the river was getting longer, the sun hotter. But the truth gnawed at him. He couldn't relax knowing someone might be using the pool while he was away. He found himself glancing out the window more often, ears pricking at the faintest sounds outside. Each time he circled the yard with his flashlight at night, the hedges in the still water mocked him with their silence. Yet the next day, new signs would appear. A smudge of mud on the tiles, a wrapper plastered damp against the drain. It left him restless, a prisoner in his own home. Then one afternoon, he found something different. Draped over a patio chair was a t-shirt, sun-bleached and damp with chlorine. Arthur froze, staring at it. This wasn't like the bottles or wrappers that could have been blown in. This was personal, deliberate. Someone had been here, comfortable enough to leave behind a piece of themselves. He didn't bring it inside. Instead, he draped the shirt across the back of the chair where it had been, hoping whoever had left it would return for it. Perhaps they would feel the sting of being noticed. Perhaps they would stop. The shirt was gone the next day. Arthur told himself perhaps whoever had left it behind had simply come back for it. Maybe it had belonged to a passing teenager, or someone cutting through the yard, embarrassed enough to take it quietly in the night. He wanted to believe there was still some harmless explanation, but a few days later, as he glanced out his kitchen window, he saw the man next door standing in the driveway, stretching with a yawn. He was wearing the shirt, the same one Arthur had found draped across his patio chair, damp with chlorine and sunlight. Arthur's breath caught in his throat. Whatever doubts he had clung to, whatever excuses he had made, were gone. He knew now. Arthur waited until the following afternoon to approach them, a bottle in hand, one of the many he had collected from the hedge in the pool. The couple were on their porch, music buzzing from a speaker, their laughter rising too sharp in the afternoon air. He cleared his throat. "Excuse me," he said, holding up the bottle. "I keep finding these in my yard, in the pool. The pump clogged last week, and it isn't easy for me to keep up anymore. Could you please stay out of the pool? Or at least tell me first." The husband looked at the bottle, then back at Arthur with a smirk. "What's that supposed to mean? You think we've got time to mess around in your pool?" Arthur's gaze flicked to the shirt stretched across his chest. "I found that left behind in my yard." The wife scoffed, folding her arms. "You're imagining things. People walk through here all the time. Maybe it was kids. Don't come over here blaming us just because you can't take care of your pool." Arthur's jaw tightened. He stood there, bottle dripping in his hand, words caught between anger and exhaustion. He thought of his wife, of the water she had loved, and how each careless denial felt like another crack in her memory. At last, he gave a curt nod and walked away, the futility pressing on his shoulders like weight. Arthur walked back across his lawn slowly, each step dragging heavier than the last. The bottle still hung in his hand, cold and damp, though he had almost forgotten he was holding it. Their words replayed in his head, sharper with every echo. "Don't come over here blaming us." Maybe it was kids. It wasn't just denial. It was dismissal. They hadn't looked at him as a neighbor, or even a man deserving of respect, but as an old nuisance to brush aside. Their laughter returned almost immediately once he had stepped away, louder now, as though mocking his attempt at dignity. Inside, Arthur set the bottle down on the counter. He rinsed his hands, scrubbing harder than necessary, as if their words had clung to his skin. For a long while he stood in the kitchen, staring out at the pool through the glass. The water shifted under the breeze, carrying a faint haze that hadn't been there before. He thought of calling the police, but he already knew how that would go. With nothing but footprints, bottles, and his own word, they would shrug, maybe send someone over for a polite talk. It wouldn't change anything, not really. So he resolved to watch. That night, Arthur sat by the kitchen window, the lights off, a mug of tea cooling beside him. The pool lay in still moonlight, glassy and patient. He tried to hold himself awake, checking the clock every hour, listening for the faintest sound beyond the walls. But age tugged at him, and by the time he surrendered to bed, he told himself perhaps they were finished. Perhaps the message had landed. The next morning, his stomach dropped. At the bottom of the pool, gleaming faintly through the cloudy water, was another bottle. Brazen, left there like a calling card. Arthur fetched the net, eased it into the water, and pulled the bottle out, slick with chlorine. His hands shook not with age this time, but with something closer to rage. Arthur hesitated before opening the shed. As much as the thought of bleaching the water had begun to feel like his only option, he knew he couldn't act without at least saying something first. He wasn't a cruel man. He had spent his whole life teaching rules, safety, responsibility. Even now, he wanted to believe that courtesy still mattered. So he crossed the lawn with a small knock on his neighbor's door. The couple appeared after a pause, the husband leaning against the frame, the wife standing just behind him, arms crossed. Arthur kept his voice calm, almost casual. "I wanted to let you know I'll be cleaning up my pool. The water's gotten dirty. I'll be turning off the pump for a while, and I'll be using stronger chemicals to balance it out. If it wasn't you using the pool, then this isn't your concern, but I thought I should give you a heads up." The husband rolled his eyes. "Why are you telling us this?" Arthur cleared his throat. "Because if anyone did decide to use the pool, it wouldn't be safe for them afterward." The wife snorted. "Old man, we told you already, we don't care about your pool. Stop bothering us with it. If you can't keep it clean, that's your problem." Arthur nodded once, the weight of futility heavy in his chest. "Very well," he said quietly, and turned back across the grass. Their voices picked up behind him almost immediately, laughter sharp and dismissive, as if his presence had been nothing more than a brief interruption. That night, with their scorn still echoing in his mind, Arthur opened the shed. The faint chemical tang greeted him like an old colleague. He pulled out the tub of chlorine granules and the bottles of household bleach, lining them neatly along the patio stones. His hands did not tremble, though his chest felt tight. He measured the doses carefully, but heavier than usual. Granules scattered across the surface, dissolving into pale ribbons that curled down into the depths. The bleach followed thick streams of liquid twisting into cloudy trails, spreading quickly under the hum of the pump. Within minutes, the sharp, acrid smell hung in the air, stinging his eyes and nose. Arthur stood there, watching the water churn into a strange, frothy haze. It no longer looked like the pool his wife had loved. Gone was the glassy surface she had floated upon. Gone was the shimmer of clarity that reminded him of her smile. In its place was something harsh, chemical, almost hostile. For a moment, doubt gripped him. Was this too much? Would she have scolded him for it, told him he was overreacting? He whispered into the night as though she might still be listening. "I warned them. I did. If they go in now, it's their choice, not mine." He rubbed his hands against his trousers, uneasy. He knew what bleach and chlorine could do: strip fabric, leave hair brittle and pale. Not deadly, not unless someone were reckless enough to drink it, but cruel enough to stain. He hadn't wanted cruelty. He only wanted peace. But peace had been denied to him. Every polite word ignored, every plea brushed aside. He told himself again, firmer this time, "I've done what I could. If they don't respect the warning, it's on them." Still, long after he should have gone inside, Arthur lingered by the patio. He sat down in the chair where she used to dry her hair in the sun, staring at the restless water. As the pump hummed, the smell of bleach hung heavy in the night air. At last, exhausted, he whispered good night to her memory and went inside, the echo of his own footsteps, the only sound left in the house. Arthur woke earlier than usual, the faint light of dawn slipping past the curtains. For a moment he lay still, listening to the quiet hum of the house. Then the memory of what he had done pulled him from bed. He dressed quickly, made tea he barely touched, and stepped out onto the patio. The pool met him with a harsh new smell. Even in the cool morning air, the tang of chlorine and bleach clung to his throat, sharp enough to sting his nose. The water itself looked strange, as if it no longer belonged to his backyard, opaque, unsettled, faint bubbles clinging to the surface where the pump still churned. Arthur stood at the edge, gripping the skimmer pole like a staff. He told himself again that it was necessary, that he had given warning, that he had done everything a reasonable man could do. Still, his stomach twisted. He could picture them slipping in again, careless and laughing, oblivious to what the water would take from them. The hours moved slowly. Arthur found himself glancing out the window whenever he went inside, unable to focus on the book open in his lap, or the tea cooling by his chair. By mid-morning he was pacing the house, listening for sounds across the hedge. Every shout of laughter carried by the breeze made his chest tighten. By noon he was sure it had happened. The neighbors' music was louder than usual, their voices raised, sharp and heated. He stepped to the window, heart thudding, and saw them in the driveway. At first he blinked, certain his eyes were tricking him. But no, the husband's hair, once dark, was streaked with uneven blonde patches, garish under the sun. The wife fared no better. Her hair was a tangle of orange and yellow, a chemical mess that seemed to glow against her furious face. Arthur pressed his palm against the glass, breath caught in his throat. They had gone in. After all his warnings, after all his efforts to avoid this very moment, they had gone in anyway. And now, unmistakably, the water had marked them. The knock came hard 3 times in quick succession, rattling the frame. Before Arthur could even reach the door, the voices followed, angry, loud, impossible to ignore. He opened it slowly to find his neighbors on the step, faces twisted in fury, their ruined hair glowing in the sunlight like some cruel joke. "Look at this," the wife snapped, jabbing a finger at her streaked hair. "What the hell did you put in that pool?" Arthur said nothing at first, his eyes flicking from her to the husband, whose dark hair had been transformed into blotches of uneven blonde. The sight might have been comical if not for their rage. "You tried to poison us," the husband shouted. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Arthur held their gaze calm but heavy. "I told you I was cleaning the pool. I warned you the water wasn't safe. If you went in after that, then you have no one to blame but yourselves." The wife let out a harsh laugh. "You think this is funny? You think you can just pour whatever you want in there and get away with it? We're calling the cops." "Please do," Arthur said softly, stepping back into his house. Minutes later, the patrol car pulled up, lights flashing against the hedge. The neighbors rushed forward, voices rising, thrusting their stained hair toward the officers like damning evidence. "He poured bleach in the pool. Look at us. He's dangerous. He's trying to hurt us." The officers turned to Arthur, who stood quietly by the gate. "Sir, would you like to explain what's going on?" one asked carefully. Arthur nodded. His voice carried the steady weight of a man who had taught rules his whole life. "The water was filthy. The pump was clogged with trash. I warned them I was shocking the pool, and that it wouldn't be safe. They chose to go in anyway." The officers looked between them, the neighbors sputtering, Arthur calm and unmoving. Finally, one officer asked, "Did he warn you?" The wife hesitated, then snapped, "He's obsessed with that pool. He's always bothering us about it. He mentioned the pool being dirty. We thought he was just rambling." Arthur folded his hands. "So you admit you went in?" Silence fell, broken only by the hum of the patrol car. The officers exchanged a glance, then sighed. "Trespassing is still trespassing. You were warned. He has every right to treat his pool." The neighbors erupted in protests, but the words were hollow now, their stained hair betraying every denial. Arthur stood quietly, the faint chemical tang still rising from the water behind him. The wife's voice cracked with fury. "You don't understand where we come from. Neighbors share everything. Pools, gardens, meals. That's how it's supposed to be. We thought we were welcome here." She jabbed a finger at Arthur, her words tumbling out faster, harsher. "And now look at us. He's humiliated us." The husband piled on, his tone rising almost to a whine. "We weren't hurting anyone. He's an old man with too much time on his hands, and now he's poisoned us just for using water he wasn't even in." The officers shifted uncomfortably, but their expressions stayed firm. One of them raised a hand. "You've admitted to going onto his property without permission. That's trespassing, no matter how you spin it. And he told you he was going to clean the pool beforehand. This isn't on him." Arthur finally stepped forward. His voice was low, steady, each word deliberate. "You don't get to decide what belongs to me. My wife loved that pool. I've kept it clean every day since she passed. And you," his eyes narrowed, locking on them, "both turned it into your playground. I asked politely. I warned you. And still, you lied and laughed while I cleaned up after you." The neighbors flinched, but said nothing. Their bravado faltered under his stare. The officer beside him cleared his throat. "This is your last warning. Stay off his property. If you step foot there again, you will be charged." The couple sputtered, muttered under their breath, then turned back toward their house, their garish, patchy hair glowing in the afternoon sun. Arthur remained by the gate until their voices faded behind the hedge. Only then did he step back onto his patio, the pool quiet behind him. The chemical tang still hung in the air, but for the first time in weeks, the silence felt like his again, not empty, not heavy, but earned. That evening, the house was still again. Arthur moved slowly around the patio, rinsing the skimmer, checking the pump, measuring the water's balance. The harsh bite of bleach had already begun to fade, the pool settling back into something clear, something recognizable. He dipped a hand into the water, feeling the cool ripple slide across his skin. For the first time in weeks, there were no wrappers, no bottles, no footprints, only the pool, quiet and obedient, waiting for his care. He set the chemical kit aside and sat down in the chair his wife used to claim after her swims. The setting sun caught the water, gilding its surface with fire, and for a moment it almost looked like it had when she was here. Arthur leaned back, closing his eyes. "It's clean again," he whispered, as though she might still be listening. His voice wavered but steadied as he added, "I kept my promise." The silence that answered was gentle this time, not hollow but whole. And in that stillness, with the pool restored to order, Arthur finally felt the weight lift.